Hello there YouTube, and in today's video we will be taking a look at the Tal'Dorei campaign setting for Critical Role, created by Matthew Mercer with James Hike. Now if you guys are not familiar with Tal'Dorei or Critical Role and are a fan of Dungeons & Dragons, then I highly recommend that you give it a good look. It's absolutely fantastic, and Matthew Mercer has created a number of additional content for 5th edition D&D. As well as I know several players who were introduced to Dungeons & Dragons by this amazing web series, where a group of voice actors gather around and play Dungeons & Dragons, and the DM, Matthew Mercer, goes through these fantastic, elaborate stories in which every D&D player and DM can take learning opportunities and gain some inspiration from these videos. It's a great series, it's very enjoyable, and I highly recommend it to anybody. Now, I'm a huge fan of Matt Mercer and his additional content. For example, he's created several classes, such as the Blood Hunter, and some death options, or another class option, the Lingering Soul, all of which are very good, including the Gunslinger. There's a few of them out there. All of his additional content is very good, is well thought out, and you can often see them being put into practice in the Critical Role series on the Geek and Sundry website. However, today we will be taking a look at not the additional classes, but at the campaign setting. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, guys, I use multiple campaign settings in order to create my own world. The reason I do this is because I like to take the best bits from each campaign setting book and create something truly spectacular. What I like about Matt Mercer's campaign setting book right here, first things first, you can find this on several different websites. I picked mine up from Amazon. It's a decently hefty, thick book with some beautiful art on the front as well. But what I love is that it comes with an absolutely fantastic little map right here of Tal'Dorei, as we can see. Now this is quite a small map, but it's literally all we need to start playing and enjoying the game. It's a lot of fun. It's a nice little land. There's enough features in here for you to experiment with and play with. But everything feels very self-contained within this world. So it's very, very easy to slip content from the Forgotten Realms or content from Tal'Dorei into other campaign settings. When we open the book here, we have a table of content and a little note by Matt Mercer himself, a little introduction for us. We can see that the content here, we have different chapters: the history and calamity of Tal'Dorei, then about running a campaign. We go into a bunch of the different races in here, which features Goliaths, High Elves, Half-Orcs, Gensai, Tieflings. What I find particularly useful, we go into the factions and societies, all the way down here, which gives multiple different and very interesting societies which you can fit into any campaign setting. Into chapter 2 then, it's basically a Gazetteer then for Tal'Dorei, which is to say it just gives you information and background knowledge on a lot of the different places. And then we come into chapter 3, which is all about character options, backgrounds, new feats, as well as allies and adversaries and a few monsters and things that you can fit into your campaign. So chapter 1 is all about the history of Tal'Dorei. It gives you a rough sort of background knowledge right here, and this comes in very handy when it comes to running a game in Tal'Dorei. There's a lot of interesting notes, as well as some in character right here. You can see this one right here is, you could even read something like this to the players. But a lot of this information is fantastic for background information. We have different pantheons, which goes into their different symbols and things. I find all of this additional content to be very interesting. and it's really great for a lot of players to. It gives them a lot of different player options. Maybe they want to try something a bit different. Maybe their character wants to worship a god that just isn't represented in the Forgotten Realms. And so introducing things like this really adds a sort of foreign element to your gameplay. And everything seems very well thought out. I'd also say that the quality of this book, the pages are quite thick, the artwork stands out, and everybody that I know that has purchased this book, nobody has had any problems with misprinting or with anything like that. It's always been arrived in excellent condition and has been absolutely well used. We touch upon the different races, and it gives some background information, and as well as some differing information as well. Of course, this is a different campaign setting, so not everything is the same as with the Forgotten Realms, and it does talk about a lot of those differences right here. One of my favourite sections in this entire book is factions and societies, because I would say this is one of the easiest things that we can introduce to any other campaign settings. I've mentioned before that I am a big fan of using the Forgotten Realms as a campaign setting. However, I still introduce some of these factions and societies into my Forgotten Realms games. And the reason I do that is because it just adds that another level of depth. We can see we've got the Clasp, which is a giant thieves organisation. You can see Houses of Craghammer. These are fantastic. If you're playing a dwarf and you want your dwarf to be a little bit different, they could have something to do with the Houses of Craghammer right there. And that really wraps up chapter 1. It's a lot of background information. It's a lot of background knowledge. Chapter 2 jumps straight into the Gazetteer. So chapter 2, the Gazetteer of Tal'Dorei, starts off by discussing the calendar and the passage of time. Again, this is very useful for running games in Tal'Dorei. We then go into, much like the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, we go into a list of different locations as well as background information regarding them. Now, I do have... this is probably my main problem with this book, is that unless you are running a game in Tal'Dorei, a lot of this content can't be brought forward to other places. However, I do like to use, cities. For example, the city of Whitestone right here. I do like to bring cities over. I also like to bring certain islands and things like that. For example, in my game, Tal'Dorei is an island sitting just to the west of Faerun. Of course, anyone who is familiar with the lore and the background of the Forgotten Realms will know that that actually is not the case. However, the great beauty of Dungeons & Dragons is that you can make the game whatever you want it to be. It talks about the government and the geography of certain areas as well. And this entire chapter, which takes up, I would say, a good hefty third of the book. You can see we're still on it after I've just skipped a good few pages there. This chapter gives you a lot of information when it comes to actually running the game. And what I like to use is, same with every campaign setting book, is a lot of this information you can quite easily take and steal from to use in your own campaigns. So this is full of really great content here for you. I'm not going to go to every page, but I'm just going to give a general flick through so you can see that there's a mixture of information, paragraphs, split right here so that it's easy to sort of read and get to the bits that you want. But it's also combined with several nice pieces of artwork along the side, which I really do appreciate, because that just makes the book seem a lot more inspiring and nice to read through. As I've previously said, the map itself isn't too big, but the amount of content that's in here makes the world feel absolutely fantastic, and it makes the world feel huge, which I will say a lot of books fail on miserably. They often don't put in enough information. As we go into chapter 3, which actually started a few pages ago here, we talk about the differences in player class options. We can see there's an absolutely fantastic image here, which really sets out how different the Tal'Dorei setting is compared to your regular D&D. If I lift this up, we can get a better look here. But we can see Goliaths there. There's a gunslinger. Very, very good. And this is actually, if you are familiar with the Critical Role Series 1, because they've gone on to Series 2 at the making of this video, you will recognise a lot of these characters in there as characters that people play. So that is absolutely fantastic. But we talk about different paths right here, different background options, and these ones are very specific to Tal'Dorei. So these are things that you can offer your players as additional content, but they're also things that maybe you could pick and choose what you want to allow your players access to. Definitely worth a read through, however. They also add, and I'm a big fan of feats. I have my own rules when it comes to allowing players to choose feats. However, they have a bunch of different new feats and abilities that players can choose to spend time to learn and to master. So this is really interesting. There are a few that I've read through that I'm a big fan of. I believe there is one. Let's see if I can find it. Here we go, guys. There's one feat here called Spell Driver for characters of level 8 or higher, which allows them to cast multiple spells per turn, which is a very powerful feat, but it's also something that is not in the regular game, and discusses the rules for that. One thing I am a big fan of here is it talks about Vestiges, and very powerful bits of armour. Now, they use a different rule system than is normal. What they do is they have the weapon stats, then they have the awakened weapon stats, and then the exalted weapon stats. That means that as the players get higher level, and they sort of gain more of a reputation with this weapon, they build up a sort of background of using this weapon. As they get through certain character developments and they develop their character in using, this weapon, this armor, the weapon and armor gets more powerful with the players, which is really interesting. And they have quite a nice little list right here of different ones. We can see we've got the Circlet of Barbed Vision, Deathwalker's Ward, and they have some pictures there so you can invisual it and show your players what these items actually look like. A Whisper, which is a curved blade there. What's really interesting is a lot of these weapons have their own different personalities as well, which is absolutely fantastic. I'm a very big fan of this chapter, and even if you're not planning on running an adventure in Tal'Dorei, you can certainly take items from these lists and present them as very big quest rewards for those players, which is brilliant. One of the most useful chapters as a dungeon master is the additional rules and content. So it's rules and guidelines for Tal'Dorei. It includes resurrection challenges, resurrection checks, quick resurrections, basically alternate resurrection rules, so that death is more of an issue, because when you get to the higher levels of Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, death really doesn't pose much of a threat. As well as downtime activities here, it just adds upon the rules, which is something that a lot, and by a lot I mean every other campaign setting that I've read, doesn't add to. But this adds to the rules, it adds additional options for you. Another thing I'm a big fan of is Chapter 4, which is Allies and Adversaries. By picking up this book, what you gain access to is a bunch of additional knowledge about creatures in Tal'Dorei, as well as stat blocks for some of those creatures. So I'm a very big fan of stat blocks, and any book that adds stat blocks to an adventure is great for me. So throughout the Gazetteer, we are told about these different tribes and races and that kind of thing. Well, we now have stat blocks so that we can run them in our games. And some of these comes with absolutely fantastic pieces of artwork, so we can visualize them a lot better. I pointed out the clasp earlier, where we have some clasp members over here, some cutthroats and enforcers, a crag hammer goat knight. A lot of these things are just hysterical and a lot of fun, but make a brilliant addition to your game. So that rounds off the book there, and as we come to the end, you can see that we get the index and the final page there. I would say, guys, that I have a unique opportunity to compare Tal'Dorei to the likes of the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide, the Forgotten Realms campaign setting, and the Living Greyhawk Gazetteer. However, when stacked up against all of these official publications from Wizards of the Coast, I will say that the Tal'Dorei campaign setting not only holds its own, but rides above those other publications. It is an absolutely fantastic addition to your book collection, which adds not only additional places, but also rules. I highly recommend you pick this up, and I highly recommend you check out Critical Role. Thank you guys for watching this, and I hope this has helped inform any of your purchases in the future. Thank you very much. Have a good day.